I've thought a lot about why this has been so hard for me. And I think it comes down to this. It's really hard for me to leave something that I feel good at. This is Becky Speckhart with Experienced Mommy. And today I am going to talk to you about the transition from being a working mom to a stay-at-home mom. 4 ways the transition affects you, but then also set expectations and build a battle plan. After I had my first child, I decided to go part-time. And this worked for my first child and for my second child. After I had our third child, we decided that it made sense for me to stay home because of the cost. And also we had simultaneously moved states. And so I was forced to quit my job. And that's the position I'm speaking to you out of. I know there are many different variations of how it can work. We're all welcome here, and we're all on this journey together. Let's talk about how the transition affected my identity. 20s are hard, y'all. We'll count 18. You go from graduating high school to being a college student to being an employee somewhere to maybe getting married, and then you become someone's wife to being a mom. And sometimes that can happen in 5 to 10 years. The reason I bring this identity thing up is because I spent a lot of time in corporate America as somebody's employee, and all of that came to a screeching halt when I decided to go full-time stay-at-home mom. All of a sudden, you're somebody's whole world, and that's overwhelming. Allow yourself to feel all the feelings. If you're a verbal processor, talk it out. Go get therapy. I loved my time in therapy. It was so helpful to have an objective source to talk things through and to say, you're not crazy. That's really hard. And that's really hard for a lot of people. Feel all the ups and downs, but then know that those are fleeting. My emotions have made a fool of me more times than I can count in all of this identity crisis. I cannot tell you how many times I have been in a rage only to have my mind completely change and for me to actually love that thing that I once hated and resented. Give it the time it deserves, because if you're not taking care of yourself and giving yourself that self-care, it affects you and your whole family. Let's talk about how the transition affects your body. I went from being footloose and fancy-free to becoming a food source. I don't know that there's anything that really could have prepared me for that. To me, breastfeeding was all-consuming. It was not natural for me, and it made me really hate being touched. I'm just not one of those moms that loves that part of motherhood. And that's okay. It's really incredible how it all works and how magical breast milk really is, but it doesn't mean you have to like it. And if you're one of those people where it was a genuine sacrifice for you, that's okay. But figure out where you're at with it and then settle with it, because you're not alone. There's going to be people that like it and people that don't. There was something a mom said that just hit me, and it really, really helped. She said, breastfeeding is like a full-time job. In my mind, breastfeeding was this thing where you just kind of did it on the side while you were cooking dinner and sweeping the floor, and it's not. Trying to feed the baby as many times as the pediatrician tells you to, trying to pump if you're working, that's also an incredible feat. Trying to stockpile breast milk for date night. The reality is, breastfeeding is a full-time job, and I wish I had looked at it like that, and then it would have allowed me to just embrace this new thing I was doing and give me the correct mindset going into it. And also, there's this element of, you're a new mom, this should be natural, but I cannot tell you the number of moms I've talked to that said, breastfeeding is one of the hardest things they have ever done. So try not to compare yourself, I can't say that enough, because there's a huge learning curve and it is a full-time job, even when you do get the hang of it. Once I got past the humiliation of pumping for the first time, oh my gosh, this is how the cows feel on milk farms when they get their udders plugged up to those things. I'm a cow. This is crazy, right? So once you get past the humiliation of pumping to the point where it's just like taking a walk down the street, I came up with some pretty sweet best practices when I went from full-time working mom to part-time working mom for pumping, and I want to tell you about those. First of all, standing desks are the bomb diggity. It helped me have more energy, and it's wonderful if you're pumping. So make sure you get one of those pumping bras that have holes in them that hold everything up for you so that you can be hands-free. And then I set up a permanent workstation with a pump there that you just leave connected at your workstation. Get yourself a little mini fridge. A lot of times those are a dime a dozen if you go to garage sales. And then when it's time to pump, I would put calendar reminders on my work calendar so that you stay up with it when you normally would be feeding your baby. After I was done pumping, I would just put all the parts into the fridge. So then you don't have to sanitize it every time. And then when it's time for the next one, you grab, you pump, and you can keep working because of that beautiful hands-free bra. And then shove everything back in the fridge. And then at the very end of the day, you can clean everything. But as long as it's in the fridge, you're fine. If you don't have a place to pump at work, get one of those cigarette lighter plug-in adapters. Then you can go out to your vehicle, you can plug your pump in there, and you just put one of those breastfeeding covers over everything once you're hooked up in there. And then you have the comfort of your vehicle. You have some privacy because of that hooter hatter. You can even get one of those sun guards that you put up for a little bit more privacy if you want. Then you don't have to pump in a dirty, smelly bathroom or a weird, awkward place in your office. I have always loved having the option of my own vehicle because then I can leave everything in there. And then the only thing you got to worry about taking in is your breast milk. So another way that the transition affects your body. Children need to be touched. Children need to be touched desperately. But I felt desperately overtouched through breastfeeding, and then even when breastfeeding was over, they just need all the touching. And I did that to my mom. I know I deserve it. In a lot of ways, I had to get over the fact that I wanted to go in my room, lock the door, hide, and eat chocolate, and instead find a way to engage with my kids where they can get their daily dose of touching, and it didn't make me crazy. So I love reading children's books. And so we read a lot of books in my house because that counts as touching. We're sitting on the couch, we're snuggling in a blanket, they're touching my leg or they're touching my arm, but we're doing something. We're reading. And reading's really good for them, so that's an extra win. And then I tell them to go play. And they're fine because I filled up their little touch tank a little bit, you know? I've talked to other people that said the dads would dance with their little kids on their feet. That counts as touching. Sometimes for a little boy, it's wrestling, right? So let's talk about how this transition affected my marriage. When I transitioned to being a stay-at-home mom, it's become very easy for me to lose that identity as a wife. I can get totally overwhelmed with my responsibilities as a mom, surviving the day, and I'm bone tired at the end of the day. And the reality is, I'm a wife still. And that relationship is incredibly important. And for me, it is God first, my husband, and then my kids, without a doubt. But my life fails to reflect that a lot, and I'm not proud of that. But I want to say, fight for your marriage. Getting a babysitter, there are plenty of times I'm like, this isn't even worth it. The effort to find a babysitter, it's expensive to pay them. And then when we actually get out there, we're just both so brain dead and tired. We're staring at each other and, it's like, is this even worth it? And I tell you, yes, it's worth it. Get together, even if you just stare at each other brain dead and hold hands. Even if you don't talk about anything deep, just be together. Be together without your children, because there are so many stories of people waking up 10 years later, 20 years later, after their kids are out of the house and looking at their spouse and they're like, who are you? So I say, no way. No, I will get together with my spouse. I will pay the babysitter and I will make it a priority because he's my best friend and it's easy to forget that. Another way that this transition into being a stay-at-home parent affects marriage is I loved working, and not only that, I had people who affirmed things in me constantly. So I went from getting affirmation to nothing. I think that's okay because there are a lot of other moms who spend their whole life and it's very thankless. Our kids grow and develop gratitude and they grow and develop empathy. And they appreciate parents often later in life. And so there's a good chance that you're gonna need to get good at asking that one adult in your household for what you need. So I find myself at home, look at how nicely that laundry's folded. Did you notice how empty the dishwasher is? And, fishing for compliments because I needed some feedback. I needed a lot of things. And so as humbling as it is, I had to get good at saying, hun, am I doing a good job? Am I a good mom? Am I doing a good job as a wife? Can you please give me feedback, even if it's not natural for you? I needed him to show appreciation, even though he's tired and exhausted from having little kids too. Another way that I would encourage you to set expectations for marriage are to talk about roles and responsibilities. Who's taking out the trash? Who's doing the dishes? Who's doing the laundry? Who's calling and paying the bills? Who's doing grocery shopping? Things like that. And then I would encourage you to talk about them again, cyclically, because as soon as there is even a small shift in maybe a kid going to school, maybe I pick up a side hustle, maybe your husband's putting more time in at work, it changes things. And then it's easy to get angsty about something small like, why aren't you running the dishwasher? Just talk about it and talk about it again and give each other grace, because we all need that. We all need grace. You know, it's rarely about him leaving his shoes there on the floor. It's about 17 layers deeper because I'm not talking about things. Oftentimes it will unearth other important things that you need to talk about. Or maybe you're like, hey, I don't feel appreciated. He says, well, I don't feel appreciated. And we're like, dang it. Sorry, I appreciate you. Once we can root up the real issues. So talk about roles and responsibilities, but also just talk. Let's talk about how the transition affects your work life. I've thought a lot about why this has been so hard for me. And I think it comes down to this. It's really hard for me to leave something that I feel good at and going and doing something that I don't feel like I'm good at. It's hard for me to teach. It's hard for me to stay home. It's hard for me to do tasks that don't feel very meaningful, like laundry and dishes and wiping down surfaces 700 times a day, when I could be somewhere getting money for doing something that I'm really good at. It's been very humbling for me because I love to work. I'm task-oriented, I'm people-oriented. Work in corporate America draws on my strengths. Work at home draws on my weaknesses. I feel highly inadequate, and who wants to feel inadequate? But I can say it's made a huge difference in my household. I think I vastly underestimated the impact that I could make on my children, even though they were little and it felt redundant and it felt repetitive and it felt not worth it. I'm seeing some of the fruit of that now that my oldest is 6. Even though I didn't feel good at it, while it's not the same kind of work, and it's highlighting things I don't want it to highlight in me, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been valuable. I'm the one that gets to screw up my kid. If this video has been helpful for you, please be sure to subscribe to the channel for more updates, and be sure to share with a friend that you think could use